What is going on, Diablo 2 fans? Dabrensky here, and today we're going to be diving into the PVM Bone necro character. Going to go through the skills, the attributes, my gear, and then I'll do an example run, kind of like the standard video. But before we jump into it, I just wanted to say thank you to Thelch and everyone else from Team Necro on my Discord who kind of helped contribute to this build video. So thank you guys for that. And also timestamps will be in the description of the video and the pinned comment below. So if you want to jump ahead, skip through the attributes and the skill tree, just go to the gear and the gameplay. They're there for you guys, so please make use of them. But anyways, guys, hope you enjoy the video. Let's jump in. Alright guys, so before I jump into the attributes and that kind of thing, there's just a few brief points that I wanted to discuss about this particular character build and this character in general. And the first is that my Bone Necro is sort of a hybrid setup between summons, I guess, and bone skill tree. It's not just a pure synergized bone tree. Number two, it's only for farming the pits. I will kind of explain in more detail about the skills and the reasons why I went with the particular breakdown, because I'm only farming the pits, but I will also discuss other skill choices if you want to farm in other areas with this character. And then finally, this is kind of a confused PVM Necromancer character in general, because the bone skill tree, it just really doesn't do enough damage, and in order to get it even up to, like, you know, 4,500-5,000 magic damage, you need to sink so many points into the bone tree that you're taking away valuable skill points that you can be putting into things like corpse explosion and whatnot, right? So, you know, corpse explosion is the necromancer's most powerful skill. It honestly is, but I mean, you can't like put points into it because you're sinking so many points to get damage on your bone skill tree. So that's kind of the weird thing about the bone necro, and that's why this is sort of a hybrid build where I do have a lot of points in the bone tree, but I also have other points elsewhere, like in the corpse explosion and whatnot. But let's take a look at the attributes. So as far as your attribute distribution goes, for this particular build, I went again with a max vita. The majority of my gameplay, or pretty much all of it, I should say, is softcore. So generally I go max vita. So I just have the bare minimum strength requirement to wear my gear. So that happens to be 156 strength points because I'm using a spirit and a monarch. So I'm actually using Enigma on this character in a dust shroud, so it has a 77 strength requirement. So basically, once I was wearing my torch and Annie, I just invested enough strength points to hit the 77 strength requirement to wear the dust shroud, and then Enigma has a bunch of plus strength based on character level. In between the Enigma and my boots, that was enough strength to wear spirits. So yeah, I think I only have like 20 or some odd points into strength, but again, it'll depend on your character and your torch and Annie and whatnot, but just have enough strength points to wear your gear. Dexterity, nothing. Energy, nothing. I get enough mana from my gear, which I'll break down later. And then the rest of my points went into vitality. Now, obviously, if you wanted to run a max block setup for hardcore, you're probably going to be using Homunculus. And in that case, just enough dexterity to get max block, and then your remaining points in vitality when you have enough strength to wear your gear. But that's basically the attribute distribution of this character. So now we'll jump into the skill tree. So we'll kick things off with the Curse Necromancer skill tree. Now it's very simple based on the way that I tailor this character. Because I'm specifically farming the pits, I only put one hard point into amplified damage. Now, amplified damage reduces monsters' physical resistances by 100%, so that plays into increasing the damage of corpse explosion, because corpse explosion is 50% physical damage and 50% fire damage. So amp damage is the #1 primary curse that I use on this build. Now, the reason that I only put one hard point into it is because between the torch and Annie and the rest of my plus skill gear, I get you know, 14 yard radius and 62-second duration, and that's not even including battle command. Technically, I get 1 more skill point, so that is you know, plenty of time and radius. I don't need to bother investing more skill points. 1 hard point is fine. Now, this is totally optional. I didn't go this route, but I wanted to just comment on it for you guys. You can have 1 hard point into Decrep as well. Decrepify reduces monsters' physical resistance by 50%, slows down the monster by 50%, and reduces the damage that they output by 50%. So it's a really nice skill to use on single target bosses like Bale or Diablo. The only thing that kind of sucks about it is it has a very small radius, so that's why, you know, it's generally used as a single target boss curse. It's not really used for, you know, general use for PVM. So, but yeah, basically just really simple, 1 hard point in amp damage, and then if you want, you can have 1 hard point in Decrepify, but that's totally up to you. So this is a breakdown of the summoning skill tree, and it's essentially 1 hard point into every single skill except for Fire Golem. Fire Golem is honestly useless, in my opinion. But yeah, so just have 1 hard point into Raised Skeleton. That's simply because it's a prereq to get Raised Skeletal Mage, and then it's a prereq to get Revive. Now, Revive is the only summon that I use with this, and I just use it for crowd control in the pits, but still 1 hard point is enough. That's all I use. Then I have 1 hard point into Skeleton Mastery, and that's simply because it just increases the monster life and damage of the revives. It does as well for the mages and the skeletons, but I don't use them. And then I have 1 hard point into Clay Golem. And I actually am currently using Clay Golem on this character build. I'm not using an Iron Golem, which I'll kind of break down as I go through the gear and explain why, but it's more of a budget version. And then just 1 hard point into Blood Golem. That's simply to unlock Iron Golem, and then I have that because I will eventually use an Iron Golem on this character. And then also Iron Golem and Blood Golem and Clay Golem, they're all prereqs to get revives, like I said, that I use for crowd control. And then I have 1 hard point into Golem Mastery, and that's just for the life boost that it gives to the golems. It just helps with survivability. And then 1 hard point into Summon Resist, because it buffs up the resistances of all summoned creatures, which again just helps with the survivability of the revives and either the Clay Golem or the Iron Golem, depending on which golem you're using for the build. So the most important skill tree for a Bone Necro is obviously the Poison and Bone skill tree. Now I'm going to break down and explain the distribution of this skill tree in quite a lot of detail, but just keep in mind that, like I said earlier, it's kind of a hybrid setup, this character build, so I didn't fully synergize the Bone skill tree. I really just used Bone Spear as sort of a supplemental form of damage, that along with the Merc, Amplified Damage, and Corpse Explosion. Just for this particular build, I just don't see the point of investing more skill points to kind of synergize Bone Spear. But anyways, I'll break down the skill tree. I have 1 hard point into Bone Armor. Bone Armor actually receives damage absorbed per level from Bone Prison and Bone Wall, so it's a really awesome 1-point wonder for this character build. I mean, it absorbs, 860 damage. Just a great 1-point wonder. I have 1 hard point into Teeth. Corpse Explosion I fully maxed to just get an insane radius. It is pretty expensive, the mana cost, 58 mana per corpse that I explode, but I just decided to fully max this to just get as big a radius as possible. Now again, this is up to you. Some particular builds will only have like 1 hard point into it and then max the Bone Spear synergies. Or you can kind of, tailor maybe, 10 hard points to get some radius, but not quite as much radius as I currently have. But I decided to max it. Now, the order of the next 3 skill points is very important. Start off by maxing Bone Spear first. This is your primary source of damage. It has the Pierce. It's just basically the skill that I use all the time with this build. But I maxed it first to get as much magic damage as possible. Now, the key point here, though, is that Bone Spear receives synergy from Teeth, Bone Wall, Bone Prison, and Bone Spirit, okay? So it receives 7% damage per level from all of those skill points. Now it's very important that the next 2 skill points that you max is Bone Wall and Bone Prison, because both of these skills are going to synergize the damage of Bone Spear equally, the same as Teeth and Bone Spirit, but at the same time it's synergizing the damage absorbed of Bone Armor. So it's really important that you synergize these 2 skills fully to get your max Bone Spear damage. And then I've been sinking the remaining points into Bone Spirit. It's not even fully maxed, and it actually does less damage than Bone Spear because of the way I distributed my points in the skill tree. But let's say you're going for a purely synergized bone skill tree. You'd have 1 hard point into Corpse Explosion. You max Bone Spear, max these 2 synergies because they're going to increase Bone Spear damage and the Bone Armor Absorb. Then I would sink all of your points into Bone Spirit after that. Bone Spirit, when it's fully maxed out, will do more damage than Bone Spear, but it is more mana intensive, and it's basically a boss only killing skill. But you would max that, and then you would put your remaining points into Teeth to again fully synergize the Bone Spirit damage. But anyways, that basically breaks down the skill trees, and I hope it wasn't too complicated, but hope I did a good job of explaining it. But now we'll dive into the gear selection on this character. Now, my gear for this character is based around a 125 faster cast rate necro build. Your gear will vary a little bit if you're running a 75 FCR fully synergized bone tree, which again, I will show some examples of how the gear will change around. But the particular setup that I'm using Heart of the Oak as my main caster weapon. I mean, it's just the best all-around caster weapon that you can use. $3 skills, 40 faster cast rate. This one rolled 33 res, so it's not the best res roll, but it doesn't really matter because we're specifically farming the pits. But yeah, I used Heart of the Oak and a flail as my main weapon. Helmet is a perfect Topaz Shaco, just for the skills, DR, life and mana, and magic find. The nice helmet. If I was farming somewhere like the Chaos Sanctuary and I wanted more resistances, I would maybe use like an Umrune in the Shaco, but again, res doesn't matter too much in the pits. The body armor is Enigma. It is very expensive, Jaw, Ith, and Burr, but I mean, everybody knows like the $2 skills, faster run walk, teleport, strength, all that good stuff. Magic find is just a key armor for this necro build. Now, like I said earlier, I am using Clay Golem on this particular build, and the reason why I'm using Clay Golem is because you basically need teleport to efficiently keep an Iron Golem alive, because you can reposition him, because it sucks when you make an Iron Golem out of Insight and he dies. But I wanted to point out that the reason I'm using Clay Golem is because you can use a budget version of this armor if you want, and if you're going to use Clay Golem and you don't have Enigma, I would suggest using a runeword like Bone. It's an awesome budget necro armor that has res and 2 skills, so if you don't have Enigma, don't worry, you can run Bone armor and then just have a Clay Golem. He'll run around a little bit. You won't be able to reposition him, but it is an option that I just wanted to point out because I have you guys tell me all the time that my builds are always using Enigma. You don't have to use Enigma with this character. With that being said, this shield that I'm using is Spirit in a Monarch, 35 faster cast rate. That's really important. You need, I think, 33, 34, 35 to hit 125, depending on how much FCR you have on your caster amulet. I'm not using Homunculus because I want the FCR to hit 125 faster cast rate. Now, my caster amulet is a 2 to poison and bone skills, 19 FCR, 20 life, 12 mana. Caster amulet. It's okay. It'd be better if it had like res on it and was 2 to necro skills, not just poison and bone. But it's the best caster amulet that I have to help me reach 125. The boots that I'm using Sandstorm Treks. They're ethereal. These are the only Eth Treks that I've ever found on this character, and the only reason I'm using them is because they have faster hit recovery on them, and I have a skiller that has 12 FHR on it, so it helps me reach an extremely high FHR breakpoint, which is really, it's honestly over the top. It's not really needed, but I just wanted to use my Eth Treks on any build because I always use War Travelers. But again, if you want more Magic Find, you can use War Travelers. The gloves, I'm using Trangul's Claws. These are pretty much exclusively the only glove that I think you would ever want to use on a Necro because they got cold res, 20 FCR, and then 2 curses. So you're going to increase like the radius on your amp damage. So they are really the #1 gloves for a Necro. The belt and ring combo is just a Rax and 2 SOJs. The SOJs are really nice because of the mana. Corpse Explosion is a very mana intensive skill, so you want to bump up your total mana as much as possible. And then the Arachnid's Mesh belt is just for the 20 faster cast rate to help reach that 125 FCR breakpoint. Now, Heart of the Oak is a relatively, or moderately, I should say, expensive rune word, Kovacs, Pull, and Thul, but I wanted to point out that, again, along the themes of budget, you can use a white wand. I mean, it gives you actually more plus skills to Bone Spear, 20 FCR, and it's a very cheap rune word. So guys, a budget version of this character, you can use Bone as an armor, and you can use a white wand. It's not going to be quite as effective as this setup, but that is, again, another budget option for this character. On Switch, I'm just using the standard CTA and Spirit combo. This is a 4-6-3 CTA. Pretty much, you know, every character outside of the Barb has a CTA and Spirit combo on Switch. And then as far as the inventory goes, I have a 11-20 Necro Torch and a 19-19-7 Anti-Charm. Pretty much standard on all my characters. I'm using Pluggy, so I have the Torch and Anti combo on all of them. I have 1 Geed's Grand Charm. This is a 38 MF Geed's. And then the entire rest of my inventory is Poison and Bone Skillers to try and get more damage on Bone Spear. So this one is 17 to life. A couple plain ones, 1 to 3 lightning, who cares, it's useless. And then this is the 12 FHR Poison and Bone Skiller that I have. Like I mentioned earlier, I use it in conjunction with Trex to hit the 86 FCR breakpoint, but again, FHR breakpoint, sorry, but again, that's totally optional, up to you. And then the entire small charm inventory here is just assorted MF, and then 6 and 7s, and I have one fire res 3 MF small charm, which whatever, that's just to boost the magic find on my character. The last gear related segment to talk about before I show you an example run of this character is the mercenary setup. We'll start off with the weapon. There's 2 primary choices, and it's honestly based around which golem you're using. So for this particular setup, I'm using Insight in an Ethereal Thresher. This is honestly kind of a junk Insight. 16 to Meditation, 217 ED, and 3 to Critical Strike. It's really a god-awful roll, but I'm just using Insight because I'm using a clay golem, so I need the mana recovery. Now, say you decided to Iron Golem a Insight, then your primary #1 choice of weapon would be Infinity, and that's to get the Conviction Aura. The Conviction Aura is minus enemy resistances, and like I mentioned earlier, Corpse Explosion is 50% fire and 50% physical damage, so having that Conviction Aura will ultimately boost your Corpse Explosion damage. Now again, getting back to the theme of budget, if you don't have the wealth to make an Infinity, but you still want to Iron Golem an Insight, that's totally fine. There's lots of other budget weapons you can pick from that hit really hard, and 3 of them that come to mind off the top of my head would be an Ethereal Bone Hue, if you can find one, Ethereal Athone Sudan, that's another really nice one, or Obedience in any ethereal base. Those are 3 amazing budget rune words that hit, budget weapons, that hit very hard, are going to give you a lot of damage. And you'd only want to use them if you incite an Iron Golem, because you really want to have the some form of meditation aura, because the Necromancer is a very mana hungry character. Now for the body armor, I'm using Fortitude, E-Bug Belrock skin, and that's just so he hits really hard. A good budget alternative would be Treachery. It's an awesome armor if you can't afford Fortitude. And then for the helmet, I'm just using Andariel's Visage with a rare jewel in it that has fire res, dex, and maximum damage, and that's just a better jewel to sock it with than a Ral rune, but you can use a Ral rune if you don't have a jewel like this. Or in terms of other alternatives for the helmet, you could use like Crown of Thieves, Talrash's Mask, Vamp Gaze. There's lots of different other alternatives, but I think Andariel's Visage is really good because it bumps up the attack speed. The Merc can hit harder and then, you know, kill stuff quicker, and then you can blow stuff up with Corpse Explosion. But that basically wraps up the Mercenary's gear and some different options. So now I'll show you guys an example run of this character. So this pit run is going to be on Player's Difficulty 3. I think it's probably the best player setting for this particular build. Player 7 is slower, and P1 you can stack more MF and farm on P1 if you want, but I'll just do P3 just for the sake of showing you guys a run. So when I'm buffing up the character, generally I do my battle command battle orders first. That gives me an extra skill point, and then I summon my clay golem, and then I'll hit the clay golem again with another buff just to get, you know, the extra level and then boost his health. And then don't forget to cast your bone armor. But yeah, so now we'll do the run. Now the reason, like I said, like I like 125 is just feels a lot more fluid teleporting than the 75 FCR does. But in general, you're basically just teleporting around, casting your amplified damage, shooting some bone spears to get a little bit of supplemental damage. And then when you see a corpse explode, or when you see a corpse or a monster killed, sorry, then you just blow it up with Corpse Explosion. And then after the first couple of packs that I kill, I'll revive, well, I'll summon some revives, and I just like using them for crowd control. So here's a nice big pack. Couple bone spears. Blow everything up. Nothing. Really like the large AoE corpse, large AoE from Corpse Explosion. That's why I maxed it. Now it's up to you whether or not you want to just focus on champion and boss packs, or if you want to blow up everything. I kind of do a mixture of both. That makes sense. Kind of large density. Large mobs, I'll kind of kill everything, but it just depends on what you're targeting for. One thing I do like to do in the pits though, level 2, is I like to kind of clump everything together the best that I can. This might be a little bit overkill on the clumping, but get everything amped damage. I got hit with mana burn. That's annoying. Anyway, so that's kind of poor execution, but the whole point is to get everything clumped together and then just blow up the screen with Corpse Explosion. Fortunately, that wasn't the best example. Check the Amuletta. Nothing. Oh geez, look at that. Talrash's armor. Oh, that'll make for a good video clip. Tal's armor. 932 defense Tal's armor. Well guys, there you go. Tal's armor with a bone necro run. Well guys, there you have it. That is the PVM MF Bone Necro build that I'm currently using in Diablo 2. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope it was informative and you maybe learned something. It's a fun character to play, but like I said, it's definitely not as good as the Poison or the Summon Necromancer. kind of limited in the areas that it can farm. But anyways, guys, really hope you enjoyed this video. If you could throw a like on it and share it, I'd really appreciate that. And even consider subscribing if you're new to my Diablo 2 YouTube channel. New weekly content and streams, so there's always new stuff from this channel. So make sure you subscribe if you want to keep up with it. But other than that, guys, thank you so much and have a great weekend.